I'm currently driving the Focus ST. When Ford came out with this car, I just got so excited because it's like a little slice of Ford of Europe coming to America.
This car's gotten a lot of press as being a front-wheel drive hot hatch with a ridiculous amount of power thrown at it. And the first time I even heard about it and read the stats, I thought, wait a minute, what about the MazdaSpeed3?
I've had a bit of a rocky relationship with the MazdaSpeed3, I admit. Back in 2010, when we drove this car, I didn't give it a very high rating.
So I'm actually more curious than you are to see what he says this time next to the Focus ST. When we drove it the first time, as much as Paul didn't like this car, I actually really liked it. Because I recognized the hooligan that the MazdaSpeed3 really is. The Speed 3 doesn't really look much different than the last time we reviewed it. And from the front wheels back, I actually really like it. It's just that front end kind of looks like a grinning idiot, and it does not match the personality of the car.
I really hope Mazda reconsiders the smiley face front fascia. On this car, it just looks like black lipstick on a high school goth queen. The giant hood scoop leaves no doubt as to the overly aggressive nature of this car, and the entire car has really a very in-your-face feel about it, and the rear overhang just feels too large, like a skirt in the breeze. The Mazda feels like a much larger car than the Focus.
Now, the Focus ST is not really much better. I mean, the front end here looks like some sort of depressed catfish. And the rest of the ST is fine. It's just kind of generic hot hatch shape. The only thing that really makes it unique are these taillights.
Going aggressive isn't easy to do without creating a tacked-on body kit kind of look, but Ford has done a great job of creating distinguishing features that are subtle but effective. The vertical front grille bars are blacked out. Notice the creatively designed center exhaust. Even the wheels mimic these same shapes. And check out the rear spoiler. It stands proud, but it doesn't look slapped on. It's very well integrated. Now, the interior of the Focus ST, this really makes you feel like you're getting more than your money's worth, and all these controls are simple and easy to understand right away.
The interior of the Focus is trying very hard to be modern, maybe trying a little too hard. The design is cohesive, it all goes together. There's just a lot going on here.
It is obvious Ford paid extra attention to the driving experience of this car. I just wish more companies would give in and put these kinds of seats in their sports cars.
These seats are amazing. These Recaros are by far better seats than those in the Speed 3. The Speed 3 seats don't have as much lumbar support, and your shoulders are kind of hanging in space. But there is more room in the back in the Speed 3. The interior here is pretty much unchanged. I mean, they've made the nav screen bigger and moved that down. It does come across a little simpler and, in a strange way, a tiny bit more mature. Except, of course, for these graphics on the door panels. And no matter what color your car is, these only come in red.
One of the biggest things I noticed inside the Mazda was how much more refined the fit and finish was. I'm still not liking the lack of harmony among the interior themes, though. It's usable, but it's not the same pleasant place to be as the ST. Now, you start getting into all kinds of problems when you put this much power and torque through the front wheels.
This amount of power to front wheel drive is frankly just a little bit too much for those tires to be able to handle all of their jobs at once.
So Ford has come up with something called torque vectoring control, and really all it means is it's adjusting the power, it's adjusting how it delivers power to the wheels.
When you put your foot to the floor in the ST, the car does everything it can to sort it out for you. You can tell that your inputs are being filtered through a computer who's making sure it counters the torque steer, and when the car pulls right, it pulls it back left. And so you're very involved, but you're not really in charge.
You feel like you can really get the power down right, and then you think, oh yeah, I'm in a front-wheel drive car. I can feel a huge difference between this car and the MazdaSpeed3.
Think about this for a second. The MazdaSpeed3 has almost as much power as the Mitsubishi Evo, and it's only front-wheel drive. That is not a balanced recipe.
I just can't get over the power. It is nothing without its turbo, but once it's spooled up, unbelievable. Here's the thing. every time the turbo hits. The car wants to tear the steering wheel out of your hands.
This doesn't have much more power than the Focus, but the power delivery is much more aggressive. The ST kind of seems to spread out its mayhem a little bit better than this car, but all of a sudden, the Speed 3 has power, and then about 1,000 or so RPMs before the red line, it just dies away again. It visited you like a ghost, and now it must go.
This is quite a bit different though. It doesn't feel so snorty and unrefined, but it just feels like a car you can hustle and be confident about it.
While the ST only has a little bit less power than the Speed 3, it never has the explosive feel of the Mazda. It just kind of surges and stays a lot more consistent in its power delivery. But it never has as much theater about it.
This is ridiculous. I'm driving like an idiot. I can't help it. I just want to bury the throttle every time I shift gears.
The Speed 3 is juvenile, and I guess I am too. It's like that relative in your family, the crazy relative that nobody really wants to admit they like, but my God, they're fun.
The first time I jumped in the ST was on a track. So track driving, of course, is very different than street drives. But I was really impressed because this is a front-wheel drive car and it didn't feel like it.
The Focus ST doesn't want you to know what the drive wheels are. It's doing everything it can to hide its identity as a front-wheel drive car. But because the computer is countering that torque steer and pulling it back the other way all the time, on full throttle, you kind of go down the street like a salmon.
So there's 3 different settings to the traction control. You've got standard, which is on. You can push it once for sport mode, but you can also press and hold, and it turns completely off. I really like that about this car. I feel like I can really precisely place the wheels, even though there's still a whole lot of power going through them.
There is some magic going on here, because the balance in this car is not what it should be. I mean, this is 60% of the weight over the front wheels, and yet it feels like the car is spinning right here at the gearbox. How is it possible that it feels this neutral? This isn't front-wheel drive.
It has a better feel in the corners. It's just pushing back in my hands just enough.
But that heavy sense feels like it's being created right here at the hub, not by the tires.
This is an electric variable steering rack,
so it changes its ratio. But even the slowest is still tighter than the Speed 3. This car just dives into the corner.
This car is much tighter than the Mazda.
There's nothing subtle about the Speed 3. It's just a laugh all the time because you are wrestling with it. You put your foot to the floor, it's just going to turn right. It's like a reverse NASCAR. You feel the rotation of the Speed 3 somewhere right around the dashboard, and that's because, of course, it is 60-40 weight distribution. Unlike the ST, they haven't done any trickery here to kind of hide that. It's not imprecise. In fact, you can put the Speed 3 right where you want it, but you can tell that the weight is over the front. Understeer.
That back end is just constantly jumping around, and of course, you're having a rodeo up front trying to steer the car. I'm not saying that's not fun. It's just, it makes for an interesting drive. It does feel well planted, just not as well planted as the ST.
The steering in the Speed 3 is lighter than it is in the Focus ST, and the steering rack isn't as tight. But when I turn the wheel on the Speed 3, I can feel a linkage. I feel myself connected to what the wheels are doing. And you get used to the torque steer. You understand how your right foot connects to how the car is going to pull in a way that isn't possible in the ST. And as a result, you can learn to compensate for it. You can figure out how to dance with this car.
I admit this car is a blast to drive. I am shocked how hard this car grips through corners. That's pretty fantastic, and that says a lot about what Mazda has done with this car. This is a race car disguised as a 4-door hatch. of course, hustling any front-wheel drive car is going to be more of a chore than rear-wheel drive, but Ford has worked some magic here. And it does feel European.
This ST is doing everything it can to convince me it's not actually front-wheel drive. But it's also not much of a laugh.
This car is so eager to see you. I'm surprised it doesn't pee on your shoe. It's just all the time, hair on fire.
I see all the faults, I know what's not great about it, but yet every time I drive this car, it's just a laugh. I just enjoy myself. Seriously, I am dying to know. You have to tell me, do you still hate that car?
No. Admittedly, no.
Okay.
I railed on this car in 2010.
Oh, they know. They remember. People have said.
We drove an earlier version, but it's the same car. I realize that.
Yeah.
Here's the deal, though. The Mazda guys are racing almost all of their cars, and they're winning.
Yeah.
So I looked at this car through the racing viewpoint.
Okay, so
if
so
you
just
will.
kind of the hardcore
approach,
All right.
and I liked it then. But I still like the more refined, better handling, kind of feels like a European car.
Oh, I see what you did there. German car snob went European. We're shocked, honestly. But
it's a fantastic car.
I got to go with you on how good the Focus is. It's surprisingly good. It hides the fact that it's front-wheel drive.
That's what struck me.
It's so neutral. They've done a great job of hiding the front-wheel drive chassis.
They really have.
I find, though, I learn about myself driving these two cars back to back. I know it's weird to say, but I learn about myself because I realize I want to be entertained. And while I'm impressed with the Focus ST, that gives me a laugh.
Absolutely.
Every time I drive it, I laugh.
I agree.
Ridiculous. You fight with the power and the steering, and I like it anyway. Intellectually, I know this is a better sorted car. I know it's a more balanced car.
Yeah.
I just want the laugh. Hot hatch to me is
laugh.
Absurd. That car's juvenile. I'm in a hot hatch. I want to be juvenile. I got to go with that.
Look, I respect this car more. I don't hate it anymore.
You're growing.
It's a really fantastic car.
It
It's
is good.
really fast. But this one, refinement-wise, handling-wise, that's my choice.
So
I
that's
had
your
to go.
hot hatch pick.
I had
So
to
what's
go
your
with
hot hatch pick? What's a hot hatch to you?
Yeah.
We want to hear it.
This is strange to say because, generally speaking, I'm not really a fan of front-wheel drive cars. I like this car. I could see myself owning this car.
The Focus ST handles better than the Speed 3. It has a more rounded power band, but it's not as much fun.
So this time around, I'm approaching this from a racing mindset. And I get it now. I understand what Mazda's doing. I still don't want this car.
The ridiculous personality of the Speed 3 just wins me over. The Focus is more balanced. The Focus is more predictable, except for when the computer's fighting with you. But this is just more fun.